Hi, this is Rabbi Tzimi Andel of Congregation Kalbnei Yisrael, Community of Jewish Friends, on a Sunday night. Pashas Mishpatim. Yesterday was Pashas Yisro, and we all renewed ourselves, connecting ourselves with the Hilchos Torah and becoming Jews anew. So special that the Medrash says that when the Jews received the Torah, the neshamas flew out of their bodies because the souls couldn't take this world. And it says even the Yidden that were already pierced, that were already dead in the cemetery, then neshamas also came out to receive the Torah. And just like we find, it says in Chassidishe, just like we find that at the time that they went through the water, As Yasha Moshe, it doesn't say that they sang, it says they will sing. Remez l'tchias ha-mesim. The Torah was hinting to the resurrection of the dead that will happen shortly in our time, hopefully when Mashiach will come. Animam b'emunah shleima, Yidden believe every day that today when Mashiach will come, the Rambam says. That's how Rav Feinstein understands the Rambam, Me'an Vadai. So this resurrection of the dead that happened at the time of the Jews singing about it, at least, that was the beginning part of it. There's Ma'aseh Machshava, there's the actual action, and there's the speaking and the singing, which is already the person is immersed in this. So the Remez of Tchias HaMesim carries us through all the Galasim till the actual action of Tchias HaMesim. Here at the receiving of the Torah was also, they were on such a level that their souls couldn't take the bodies anymore. So that's a kind of Tchias HaMesim, so to say. It's a resurrection in a way that it gives the Yid the chance to be able to become on that level somewhat of Tchias HaMesim, of being more spiritual, so to say. And as we mentioned from the Hilchos Beisan, that a Yid, when he receives the Torah, yesterday, when they read about the Kabbalah Torah, the Yid must believe in his own koyach of tshuva, must believe in himself on a spiritual way, that he could reach these levels on his level to really change and not to return to his foolishness and grow in the beautiful ways that the Eibshter gave us through the Torah, that every one of us has in our neshama, the beautiful virtues and good midas and studying and davening and Abbas Yisrael, Abbas Torah, and Abbas Hashem. The Eibshter from Mishataka do it. So, a few Chassidishe stories. So the great Dudon Basada, Reb Reuven HaKohen, Reb Reuven HaLevi Horowitz, wrote a sefer Dudon Basada. At the end of his life, he was in the city of, he went over to Poland. The name of the city that he was in was Żarnowca. He was very great. He was a student of the Heilige Rebbe Melech Lezhenska and of the Chayze, his student. And the Chayze would say about him that he was the third of the 36 tzaddikim that are hidden in every generation, like Chazal teach us. It happens to be that when it came to Tish, that he would have every Shabbos and Yontif, he would always lead the benching with a cup of wine, like the halacha is. And he would never give it to anybody else to do. So Chassidim once mentioned it to the Chayze, his Rebbe. He said, of course, because he's the neshama of Rav Hamnuna. And the Zohar HaKadosh says on Rav Hamnuna is Sava Layav Kisa de Barchasa Lebana Shachra. He never gave the Kais Shal Bracha to somebody else. He always let it on his own for whatever reason his Heilig and Neshama understood. Anyway, in that time in Uzra, in Żarnowca, there was a horrible plague and people were dying. Halvayit should stop by us. And they didn't know what to do, so they went. A number of shluchim went to the Holy Chazal of Lublin with a pidyon nefesh, with a kvittel, with money for tzedakah, money so that they could have a connection with the tzaddik. And the Chazal told them that they should go back and build a home for Reb Ruvain, for this Reb Ruvain, the Dudam Basada. And then the Magefa will stop. Then the horrible plague will stop. As soon as they came home, they collected money for a home for him, and immediately the Magefa stopped. He lived mamsh like a pauper. You're not talking about anything that we could ever imagine. We're talking about that on Shabbos he barely had a piece of bread and a little soup for him and his large family. And there's a lot of stories. The Aruch of Yisrael, the Rav said about him that he's a Kaddish Elyon V'Naira, a holy, higher and awesome neshama, and that his mouth is locked with 12 locks. Not locks and bagels. Yeah. There's a story here from Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak of Lubavitch. It was just his Yahrzeit, the 10th of Shvat, passed away in Tafshin Yud. So right after the wedding of the Heilig Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak of Lubavitch, he didn't want to have pleasure from his learning, like many tzaddikim. He didn't want to be supported by others. So he was looking for something he could do that wouldn't be too many hours during the day so that he could continue his studying and grow. But still in all, it'll give him a paycheck so that he could support himself and his wife and eventually his family. And there was a chassid by the name of Rabbi Shmuel Gerari. There's a famous Gerari family in Chabad. And he realized what he needed. So he offered him to work by him a few hours a day as a bookkeeper. And he paid him much more than his work was worth. Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak was very happy with him, and he was very happy with him. And one day, a fella comes into this Reb Shmuel with utensils of gold and silver, and he says, this cup is from the Rebbe Melech, this other thing is from the Baditsheva, this is from the Balatanya, and on and on and on. The Specha is from the Rebbe Melech, the Esek Pushka is from the Maggid. And Reb Shmuel realized that, being that he was a known rich person, the guy wanted to make sure that he made a couple of good sales on him. What does one do to know whether any of these things are truly utensils of these great people, which is worth a lot of money, and it's chus to have such special holy things. So he figured he'll go into the Rayatz, into Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak, his bookkeeper, quote unquote. And he tells him, this guy came to me, he says, this is Magid's Becha, and this is the Rebbe Melech's. Could you please tell me what's true and what's not true? And the Rayatz took one utensil in his hand and says, this is nothing. Takes another one, says again nothing. Till he came to one utensil. And he says, this is something holy. And you should buy it with as much money as the guy asks for. Nope. Shmuel was very impressed, but he was still a chassid of his father, the Marshab. So he decided that he'll wait a couple of days till he could get an appointment to go into the Marshab, and he'll ask the Marshab. The Heilige Mashab took the utensils and didn't have to touch them. He looked at this one, he says, this is nothing, that's nothing, this you should buy with as much money as the guy is. And it was exactly the same thing that his son, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak, the future Babchi Rebbe, told him. They both said the exact same thing. Shnei Nevi'im nisnabu b'signan echad. Two prophets said prophecy in the same way. So he was very happy now that he had, two witnesses, if you want to call it, or two Heilige Tzaddikim that both said the same thing. He went back to the Mariyatz, and he said to him, you can't be my bookkeeper anymore. From now on, I'm supporting you without you having to work. I know you want to work. You're not going to be working. You'll use your time for learning. And he stagged us and became the holy tzaddik that he did. We will now go to some learning that we were studying, the Kitzer, Shulchan Aruch, chapter 141, about the laws of the joyous holiday of Purim. Okay. So I believe we're up to Yud 10. I think 10, but we'll start from 10. 141, chapter 141, paragraph 10, says the Heilige Kitzer Shulchan Aruch, the custom among all Jewish people is that the reader, Balkari, the one who reads the Megillah, does not read from a rolled-up Megillah scroll, but rather he spreads it out and doubles the pages over, like a letter. Of course, the Megillah is called the Letter of Purim. That's in Esther chapter 9, verse 29. The scroll should be spread out before reciting the blessings prior to the reading of the Megillah, so that there is no interruption between the blessings and the reading. One should not allow the Megillah scroll to drag on the ground. This we learned. Learned about the Shachiyanu. Shachiyanu by day goes for all the mitzvahs. Okay, we'll go to 14. I don't think we did that yet. Okay, 14. The reader must recite the names of the 10 sons of Haman in Esther chapter 9, verses 7 to 9. That's part of the reading. They were all executed on the same day, the 13th of Adar, as well as the word Aseres, 10, the first word in verse 10, all in one breath. This is done to highlight the fact that they were all killed and hanged at one time. Initially, it is customary for the reader to say from the words Chamesh Meos Ish, 500 men, all in one breath. However, after the fact, even if he interrupted with a breath between the names of the 10 sons of Haman, he has fulfilled his obligations. Okay, you don't have to get worried about it. Now, okay. So it's better to do like that, but if you don't, it's also okay. Now, regarding the custom in some places that the entire congregation recites the name of Haman's 10 sons along with the reader, it is not a proper custom, says the Kitzer. Rather, the reader alone should recite them, and the congregation should listen, just as they do for the entire Megillah. In many congregations, the congregation says the names of the 10 sons of Haman first, and then those verses are read by the reader of the Megillah. Okay. When the reader recites the verse, that night sleep eluded the king. King couldn't sleep, in other words, in chapter 6, the beginning of the chapter. He should raise his voice, because that is when the main part of the miracle begins. It was on that night that Achashverosh met Haman and ordered him to parade Mordechai on the king's horse in a display of honor. From that point, Haman's fortunes waned, and Mordechai's fortunes, along with those of the Jewish people, rose. So that's like the beginning of the miracle. When he recites the words in chapter 9, verse 26, because of all that was written in this letter, referring to the Megillah itself, he should shake the Megillah. 15. If one has an invalid Megillah scroll or a Chumash before him, a Bible that they have in the shuls, usually in the back of the Chumash, they have the Megillah Sester, so that's why he says the Chumash. He should not read along with the reader, because if he's reading, he will be unable to concentrate and listen to the reader. Now, although reading from a Chumash is considered to be reading by heart, which initially should not be done at all, nevertheless, after the fact, if one did read even up to half of the Megillah by heart, up to half, he has fulfilled his obligation. Therefore, as noted above, one who does not have a valid Megillah should follow the reading using a Chumash, so that he can say any words that he did not hear from the reader. It's Mishnah Berurah 69, 7 and 19. In other words, preferably everybody should have their own kosher Megillah. And the reading, not everybody knows how to read the right way, so we hear it from the Balkar, the one who leads the congregation. However, if somebody does not have one, it's good to have a Chumash also, but not to read the whole thing, just to hear and follow with. And like we've learned before, that if he missed something, he could always read it and catch up from his own private Chumash. Even though it's not a kosher Megillah, it's not written the way it should be written in the halacha. Furthermore, even if he will be able to concentrate and hear the reader, perhaps another person will hear his reading and will not concentrate on listening to the reading of the reader because of his reading his Chumash. Likewise, no one should assist the reader by reading to him the words with the proper cantillations by heart. Therefore, with regard to the 4 verses of redemption that the congregation customarily recites aloud, there's 4 verses that we say aloud, the reader must go back and read them from the valid Megillah scroll after the congregation finishes reciting them. Okay. If he didn't do it, then it's okay anyway, the Mishnah Berurah says in 690, 15, 16. Okay, we're up to paragraph 16. One who has already fulfilled his obligation of reading the Megillah and is reading for other people to exempt them of their responsibility of hearing the Megillah. If the one who needs to fulfill his obligation knows how to recite the blessing himself, he should recite the blessings himself. Shmuel writes that the common custom is that the reader recites the blessings, even if the one listening is capable of reciting them. Okay. If the one being exempted is a woman, it is better for the reader to recite the blessings. In the case of a woman, so the reader says the blessings. In this situation, he recites the following version of the first blessing. Megillah, who gave us the commandment to hear the Megillah. Usually the blessing is Al Mikra Megillah, to read the Megillah. However, some authorities rule that the obligation of women is not to read the Megillah, but to hear the Megillah. The appropriate blessing for women, therefore, is L'Shmaya Megillah, to hear the Megillah. This is Mishnah Berurah 692:11. Next, 17. On Shabbos, when Shabbos is not Purim, it is permitted to move the Megillah scroll. Nevertheless, if Purim falls on Sunday, one may not bring the Megillah scroll to the synagogue on Shabbos for the purpose of the Megillah reading on Saturday night, or Matzah Shabbos, even in a city that has been made fit for carrying with an Erev, because this is included in the prohibition of preparing from Shabbos to the weekday. Achana, you're not allowed to prepare from Shabbos to the weekday. We'll stop here, meanwhile. Let's see what the other poskim say also. That was 141. It doesn't add anything. Let's see what Rav Braun says in Shalom Son of Halacha, 141. The Pri Megadim and Eshel Avram says that if Purim comes out on a Sunday, it's simple that it's prohibited to read the Megillah when it's still daytime until the stars go out, until it's Matzah Shabbos. And there's also a prohibition. He's being over to read it then. Okay, Mishra Sav holds that it's permissible to read the Megillah before before the stars come out, when it's important, when there's an emergency to do so. And from the Magen Avram in Shimon Beis 342, it seems that he doesn't say either way, but he goes back and forth, and he's not clear what the halacha is. Also, the Pri Megadim brings down that if Purim comes out on Friday, and there was an emergency, and they weren't able to read the Megillah during the daytime, one may read during Bein HaShmashis. That's for Rav Tepaskin. That's the time between sundown, but it's still before the stars come out. And he says, look at the Taz and Taf Reish in 600, and if you have our Rosh Hashanah booklet, it was an unbelievable story with the Taz in his day, the Olei Turi Zahav, that they couldn't get hold of a shayfa till when it was already almost after Rosh Hashanah, I think it was a Shabbos then, was it? And the Taz said people were so overcome by it, they were so overwhelmed and afraid it might be a bad sign for the year, God forbid, so he allowed them then to blow shofar. Anyway, have a good night. Thursday night, Friday, and Shabbos is Rosh Chodesh Adar, the most joyous time that Jews have, and God should make us more joyous than that, and we should be zeicher to Yeshua's nefus. Have a good night.